Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, and today we are once again ranking an author's entire backlist. So it's been a little while since I've done one, but I finally have another author to do. I have done a couple of these before. I have done Cassandra Clare, I have done V.E. Schwab, I have done Marissa Meyer, I have done the Grishaverse, and I've done Alice Oseman. I think that's all? I could be wrong though. Yeah, and I have a couple of others in mind that I want to do, but I still have to read more of their books if I want to get to them. I have officially read all of the Fredrik Backman books that I want to. So I have not read the sequel to Beartown. I think there's actually 2 sequels, but I don't think one of them has been translated to English yet. But the second one, Us Against You, I think, I haven't read. I'm probably not going to read it. Obviously try and change my mind, like if it's a really good sequel, but I feel like Beartown doesn't need one. And then I also haven't read his non-fiction, which is something to do with like advice to give to my son or something. I can't remember the name, but I'm not really a non-fiction reader, so I also have not read that. So those 2 don't count. Obviously, once again, these are all my opinions. You can tell me down below what your opinions on his books are. I'm not a contemporary reader a lot, and so I have surprisingly managed to read his entire backlist. So the book that I'm putting in last place, which I think is 7th, is going to be Britt Marie Was Here. I was about to go say Fredrik Backman. That is literally the point of the whole video. I am ranking Fredrik Backman's books. Follows Britt Marie, obviously. And she is an older woman, and she, for the first time in her life, isn't looking after anyone else. And so she is out on her own, and she is like kind of looking for a job, and she ends up going to this really small town and becomes basically like the manager of this like community hall. As with all of his books, it's all about the relationships she builds and getting to know these people and learning about her past and how it affects who she is now. So I did like this. I gave this a 4-star, so like no books on this list are going to be below 4. But I think this one, there was a couple of reasons why this one didn't really connect to me. I did find Britt Marie slightly more annoying than his other characters. Like, I feel like with some of the other books, like you really get to see them change and you really understand why they are the way they are. But sometimes Britt Marie just, I still didn't understand her motivations. Like sometimes, yes, a lot of the stuff made sense, but other times I was just like, why are you behaving like that? I did overall enjoy this. I think another thing is I did read it a bit too close to A Man Called Ove, and you'll obviously see that later, but I really love that one. And this one I think was a little too similar, and I read it a little too close in time. I think if I had read them with a couple more months or something in between them, then I might have enjoyed this more. And then the second thing that I think impacted my enjoyment of this is I do not care about soccer whatsoever. Like that is a big thing. So like she ends up nearly becoming the coach of this soccer club, and I just don't care. And like they're always mentioning, oh, I support this club and that means that I'm this kind of a person. And I'm like, I've heard of these clubs, but I don't care. So yeah, so I think that's kind of why this story didn't really impact me as much. But by the end, it's still like, you know, buried its way into my heart. So that is in 7th. So then I do not have the book that is going in 6th, because that is The Deal of a Lifetime, which is a really short novella that takes place on Christmas. And I went into it not knowing what it was about whatsoever, and I was really shocked when I learned what it was about, because I didn't expect it. It's very sad. So supposedly he wrote this on like Christmas Eve, and I'm like, were you okay that Christmas? Like, why was this what was in your head? It is very sad. It talks a lot about death and about like parents and kind of an absent parent, and how after some time the divide kind of grows too big. And it was just like really quite heavy, especially for something that was written on Christmas while he was like with his wife and kids. I'm like, dude, are you okay? But I mean, I still did really enjoy it. Again, another one that is a 4-star read. And yeah, kind of when I got to the end of it, I was like, that's it? I was like, no, you can't just end it like that. But he did. He ended it like that. So yeah, but yeah, I had to like sit down for a couple of minutes after I finished reading it and just like stare at the wall and be like, what did I just read? So yeah, I know that a lot of people do complain that it feels a bit too short, but I still really enjoyed it. I think that he managed to make us feel and understand this character in such a short amount of time. Like, yes, if it had been 200 pages long, then we would have gotten more. We would have felt even more connected. But it's supposed to be a novella. It isn't supposed to be really long. And I can totally, and I think it wouldn't work that well as a full-length novel. I think just the abruptness of it is part of what makes it what it is. That is number 6. So then on to number 5, again another one that I own, and that is My Grandmother Sends Her Regards and Apologies, and this is another 4 stars. I really have enjoyed all of these books, so when I'm like, oh, it's in 5th, I'm like, that feels so low, but it's just because his other books I do prefer, but I still really enjoyed this one. So this is the most recent full-length novel that I read by him, and so this follows Elsa, and her grandmother has basically sent her on a bit of a scavenger hunt to deliver all these letters to tell people that she's sorry. And I really enjoyed this one. Again, typical Fredrik Backman fashion, it's a pretty slow-moving, character-focused story, but this one is very unique because of the fact that our protagonist is a very young child. She is 7, almost 8, and she is a very smart child, probably too smart for her own good at points. And she kind of gets herself in a lot of trouble. It was so well done because the balance between her being so young and her being so wise beyond her years is done really well in it, because she imagines a lot of this stuff as this fantastical world that her and her grandmother made together. And so she imagines all of these events that are happening in this world. And so we have that very youthful, naive, oh, this is all fantasy make-believe, while also seeing her be so smart, being like, you know, when adults in her life are asking her stuff, he's like, of course I know what that is. And so it's a really interesting balance. And so I think that's why it was a 4-star though, because like, while I ended up loving how it was told, it did take me more time to get used to that sort of a writing style. But again, another one that was a 4 stars and I really enjoyed. So then number 4 is another one that I do not own, and that is And Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer. So this one is again another novella, and this one is about a grandfather who has Alzheimer's and is trying to find a way to tell his grandson. And again, I mean, his novellas really pack a punch, and I know people way prefer And Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer to The Deal of a Lifetime, but I mean, they're pretty close in the ranking. But yeah, I do prefer And Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer slightly, but I feel like they are both really good novellas and really pack a punch. And again, another one that when I finished it, I actually just had to like stare at the wall for a minute and be like, that can't be it. No. I was like so nervous that I would like bawl my eyes out reading it, because that's what a lot of people do when reading it. I didn't bawl my eyes out, but it did get me slightly teary, which is very impressive. So much impact in so few words. And yeah, the way it ends, oh, just thinking about it, no. And again, that was a 4 stars. I'm not sure did I say that. So now we are on to the top 3. So number 3 is going to be Anxious People. So this is his most recent release, and this one, it follows it is the day before New Year's Eve, and a bank robber has failed at robbing a bank, and they have run into this apartment viewing and has started to hold the place hostage accidentally. They didn't mean to really do this. And then we follow a father and a son who are police officers as they are trying to figure out what really happened, because we are kind of flashing back and forth between times. So we are getting kind of some interviews of the father and the son discussing it after the fact, and then we were getting some flashbacks of actually being inside the apartment and you know, things aren't adding up. This one was a 4 stars. It was a really high 4 stars. I do think that it could have been a 5 star, except for the fact I read it really quickly, which might sound silly, but I think I should have sat with it a bit longer, but I wanted to squeeze it in before the end of the year last year. Less than 400 pages, I can totally do this. And so I sat down and I read it before the New Year's, which I think impacted my enjoyment. I was like, I feel like I should have read it over a couple of more days. But I mean, I still give it a 4 stars. It was still really good. Again, I feel like my main complaint with all of his books are like the first like 50-ish% are pretty slow. I think it was actually like about the first third in here that I found really slow. And I think that might just be a contemporary thing, which is why I don't read a lot of contemporaries. Like, you spend however long trying to get to know the characters and everything. I always think that the emotional payoff at the end of his books is worth the slow build up. So that's why I don't mind it, because I was at the start of this, I was like kind of confused because this is a lot of people's favorite Fredrik Backman. Like, people absolutely adore it, you know, they're crying, everything. And I was like, I don't really see it. Like, I like it, but I was like, this is probably my least favorite so far. But then by the time I got to about a third of the way through, I really started to get into it, and there was some like plot twist, and like I feel like probably a good few people could have guessed it, but like there was something that I was like, no. So that definitely like got me like way more interested when things started being revealed. Oh, this person knows this person and all of that. And that is something that I absolutely adore with every single one of his books, is the connections between people. So like some of them don't have it as much. Like this one is the biggest example probably of it, maybe along with My Grandmother's Sincere Regards and Apologies. Obviously the novellas don't have it as much. I mean, these two, Britt Marie is actually a character in both of these books. And then Britt Marie, like the way things that have happened in her past affect how she is now. I love that. And then how we see, so the grandmother knew this person and this person knew that person, and now they're kind of all coming together. I love that, and I think Anxious People is actually the best example of like kind of really interesting connections between the characters. Two characters that like they don't know each other, but both of them know this other person, and that person has had a big impact on their life in different ways. And just the way all of that came together. And there are so many people in this apartment, and so some of them have connections to the apartment, and some people have connections to the people around them, and just the way it all builds is so good. And yeah, I love all of that stuff. I love seeing the like interactions and how they all know each other and how they are all connected. That is one of my favorite things about his books, and I think that really shone through in this one. So if that's something that you like, I would definitely recommend this one for you. So this is definitely one that I want to revisit in the future and give it a better chance, because I think it could be a 5-star on reread. Also, I will say another thing that Fredrik Backman does a lot in his books is jumping back and forth between timelines. And so that one, which for some reason I didn't expect going into this, and I don't know why, because I had read like Britt Marie and I had read A Man Called Ove, and he had done it in both of those books, like jumped back and forth between times, and yet I was confused when that happened in here. I was like, I don't know why I thought that. And so number 2 is going to be Beartown by Fredrik Backman, and so this one was my first book that I read by him, and it was also a 5 stars. This one, it follows a small town. Town is kind of starting to die, and their last hope is this hockey team, and it's just a group of boys. Something terrible really happens, and the town is divided by people who want it to be hushed up, who don't believe it, and also between those who want justice. So it's a hard hitting read, and I think this one suffers the most from his slow starts, and it's a pretty slow novel throughout, but it's really emotional. I really loved reading all the different perspectives from it. It has so many perspectives in it. So we are reading from different backgrounds, different characters, and like different families. So some of them are rich, some of them are poor, some of them have been in this town their whole life, some of them have only just returned to this town, and so all of them have such different experiences. It's been like over 2 years I think since I've read this, so my memories of it aren't the best, but I remember being just really amazed by how well written the characters were. You really understood these characters, and like you really wanted to punch some of them, and just some of them you just absolutely adored, and you got really frustrated with decisions that they were making, but you totally understood why. And so they were just such well developed characters. It starts very intense because it starts with late one evening towards the end of March, a teenager picked up a double-barrel shotgun, walked into the forest, put the gun to someone else's forehead, and pulled the trigger. This is the story of how we got there. And like, I mean, you read that and you're like, what? It's a lot slower than that. It's a very intense beginning, but that is the story. It is the story of how we got there. That leaves one more book. And I feel like this is probably a very popular opinion when it comes to Fredrik Backman, and that is A Man Called Ove. I adore this book. I give it 5 stars. It made me cry. I do not cry when reading books very often, but this one, yeah, it made the tears come, and that is very impressive. This follows Ove, and he is an old man. He's one of the grumpiest old men that you will ever meet, and he thinks that every one of his neighbours and everything are just complete idiots. And then one day he gets new neighbours, and one of them is not a complete idiot, the other one is. But somehow he finds himself being dragged into their life and being asked to drive them places and to help fix their this and fix that. And then because one person is asking him for help, suddenly a whole community of people are getting involved in his very quiet life. I think one of the reasons I love this book so much is because Ove does remind me a bit of like a mix of like my dad and my granddad's. So yeah, I definitely like some lines. I was like, oh my god, no, way too similar. But this one, it's so beautiful. It's a really beautiful story. And again, this one does his typical like multiple timelines. So I always say, like, for example, we see that throughout this book, Ove only ever drives one car, one brand. That is his brand. He will never change. And then we like flash back and we find out that that was his first car. It was the car that his dad had. And so it's just little things like that. Also, I have a receipt. The car one is like a really early example in the book, so I feel like it isn't very spoilery, but we learn a lot more. So like there's certain things he doesn't like because of really bad experiences that he had, and there's things that he loves because good experiences and all of that. And just the way it all connects together to make him who he is was just like so brilliantly done. And just seeing everyone in his life come together and kind of nearly a found family kind of an element. It was so beautiful and I really loved it. So that is book number 1. That is the ranking. We have Britt Marie Was Here, The Deal of a Lifetime, My Grandmother Sent Her Regards and Apologies, and Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer, Anxious People, Beartown, and A Man Called Ove. So this is my ranking. I will say I do think you should probably read Britt Marie Was Here before My Grandmother Sends Her Regards and Apologies. I think My Grandmother Sends Her Regards and Apologies actually came out before Britt Marie Was Here, but I feel like if I had known, because we get basically Britt Marie's whole backstory in this book, and so I feel like it wouldn't have had the same impact of learning about that stuff in this book. So I would suggest reading this one first. But other than that, I don't think it really matters what order you read it in. I do hope you enjoyed. Tell me which is your favorite book that you've read by him. Thank you guys so much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed. If you did, subscribe. And I will see you all in the next one. Bye.